So this is part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel. Khoodeelaar is a Siloti language word with 3 dimensions or more than 3 dimensions of action, politics, ethics, implications. And Khoodeelaar, the action word in Siloti, was devised at the beginning of this century by me as initially wake up call, like the French word oh yeah. It's a cry, but it's much more than a cry to wake up the people. It's actually mobilize the people and to get it right and put in the urgency into the whole call. Now, this is Thursday, the edition, part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, BabyAngelGeronimo editions. This is the part A of the BabyAngelGeronimo editions. Now, Geronimo is just there, Geronimo. BabyAngelGeronimo. As we say, he is the world's best BabyAngelGeronimo. He is the witness, the most authentic, truthful witness, the most compassionate, ethical, and moral witness on the face of the earth, and he is the best loved BabyAngelGeronimo on all the planet, the whole planet. And BabyAngelGeronimo is the byword for daily updates on the lying perpetrated by the congenital liar Boris Johnson. In the last, let's say, 90 minutes, during the last 90 minutes, let's say, the Sky News had their version of the press preview fronted by Anna Botting, who had 2 guests. One is Tim Montgomery, and another is a person that I had not seen before. Part of the reason is that since December 2019, we have stopped watching so-called mainstream television channels. So overwhelmingly dishonest and corrupt are the outputs that it is absolutely unwarranted, unjustifiable, unacceptable to suffer additional distress and bewilderment by watching these television channels. Now, Tim Montgomery said in the edition broadcast on Thursday, that is still few minutes left of the Thursday, 6th of January 2022. He said completely untruthfully that the American Democratic Party was now blaming every single Republican for the 6th of January riot. That is plainly not true. And despite the fact that it's not true, Anna Botting didn't comment on Montgomery's assertion. So that is the kind of lax, not rigorous content. And it is never anywhere near what we do. We carry out the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street because we go into the actual narrative, actual agenda that is perpetrated by the Fleet Street papers. And we connect them to real events. In the case of our references to the contents, we always are able on the facts to relate to an update on the events that took place in Tower Hamlets or about Tower Hamlets. So we'll come to that in a little while. Here is something that we did discuss in relation to Tower Hamlets at length in the last edition, that is the edition broadcast on Wednesday the 5th of January 2022. Here is a reference to Nazir Ahmed. We discussed at length the role of Nazir Ahmed and Keith Sleaze-Vaz and George Galloway in promoting the corrupt idea of having an elected executive mayor in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets. That was about a parade held in the Brady Centre in Hanbury Street on the 6th of February 2010, which was a Saturday. And we said yesterday at length that Nazir Ahmed was one of the crooks that was brought there. Well, Nazir Ahmed, Ken Lying, still Livingston, George Galloway. These are the people that were paraded by the collection of crooks who wanted the London Borough of Tower Hamlets to be lumbered with the corrupt post of executive mayor. Now, we said that Nazir Ahmed and Ken Lying, still Livingston, George Galloway, and Sleaze-Vaz were lined up and paraded as the kind of famous names that were supporting. At that stage, it was a referendum for the yes to the mayor post campaign. And all these liars did the lies. Now, everyone except George Galloway at that point, on that date, was an outsider because Galloway was still in post as the member for Parliament for Bethnal Green and Bow. Now, here is the Guardian's version on on the conviction of Ahmad. It says the former peer Nazir Ahmad has been found guilty of serious sexual assault against a young boy and the attempted rape of a girl when he was a teenager in the 1970s. Ahmad, 64, was found guilty yesterday of buggery against a boy in Rotherham and twice attempting to rape a girl. Buggery was the legal term for the specific sexual assault at the time of the offense. The former Lord Ahmad of Rotherham was charged with his two older brothers Muhammad Farooq, 71, and Muhammad Tariq, 65, but both were deemed unfit to stand trial. A woman told a jury at Sheffield Crown Court that Ahmed attempted to rape her in 1973 and 1974 when the defendant, that is Ahmed, was about 16 or 17 years old, but she was much younger. The former politician was also found guilty of a serious sexual assault against a boy under 11 in 1972. The jury was played a recording of a telephone call between the two complainants made by the woman after she went to the police in 2016. Tom Little QC, prosecuting, told the jury that the call was prompted by the man contacted the woman by email saying, "I have evidence against that pedophile." Ahmed claimed the allegations were a malicious fiction, but the prosecution said the call showed they were not made up or concocted. In the recording, the woman said to the man, "What they did to you was utterly wrong, and it's time now to seek justice for the little boy who could not protect himself." Ahmed, who denied the charges, was found guilty of two counts of attempted rape and one of buggery. His brothers Farooq and Tariq faced charges of indecent assault in relation to the same boy that Ahmed abused, and also yesterday the jury found that they had carried out the acts alleged. The judge, Mr. Justice Lavender, bailed Ahmed to appear at the same court for sentencing on 4th of February. Rosemary Ainsley of the Crown Prosecution Service said the verdicts clearly showed that no matter the delay between the offense and the trial and the defenses raised, they could be sure that the accounts of the victims were credible and true. She added one of these defendants held a position of power, influence, and responsibility for some time in the House of Lords. But this case clearly illustrates that where there is sufficient evidence, even in challenging cases, the Crown Prosecution Service will bring a prosecution, but evidence before a jury and see rightful convictions. A previous trial collapsed last year owing to errors made by the prosecution. Ainsley considered that disclosure failures should not happen, but said the case showed the challenges faced in dealing with the huge amounts of information and proper disclosure to the defense to allow a fair trial. But the case also shows our determination to pursue the case and the court's ability to ensure the defendants received a fair trial and their victims see justice. Appointed a life peer by Tony Blair, Ahmed resigned from the Labour Party in 2013 and quit the Lords in 2020. Now so he resigned the House of Peers himself. 2 calendar years ago. Now, this is very important for students of local councils and students of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets Council, the Crooked Council as we call it. Now, Ahmad was kind of brought in at that time in February 2010 as a member of the House of Peers. There was another man also with a Muslim name and probably another member of the House of Peers. But I shall not go into that particular man's role because he was there, but he didn't kind of commit the lies that Ahmad did, and as Keith Sleaze Vaz did, as Ken Livingston did, and as George Galloway did. Because on this 6th of February 2010, they had known that they were taking part in a kind of criminal plot to take over the Tower Hamlets Council by the so-called elected mayor. And there was nobody, and there has been nobody since that demonstration. I mean, that demonstration would have been a noiseless, if you like, silent demonstration if I hadn't paid for the loud hailer and the battery and so on, and for the taxi or the minicab in order to travel to a location to get the loud hailer and to come back to the spot outside the Hanbury Street. Now, nobody since that date, none of the people who were present, even as opponents of the corrupt mayor post, the people who were present when I was addressing them, none of them, not one of them has maintained the position of opposition. They have said words to the effect, this, and the other. They have said things from time to time, but effectively they have kind of gone quiet. And that is part of the corruption of Tower Hamlets Labour Party. Because most of the people I addressed, almost all of them except one that is seen with the loud hailer in the montage that the Khoodeelaar campaign has been publishing from time to time, is or used to be in the Lib Dem, and she was a councillor for Lib Dems, and she is no longer, as far as I can tell, she is no longer visible politically in any capacity. She may be a member of the Lib Dems or whatever, but she has not been active. And what I found was that every single one that supposedly opposed the elected mayor post has gone silent. That's number one. That's number one group, including one councillor whose words we have been using in the BabyAngelGeronimo campaign, which is, BabyAngelGeronimo means the breaking up of democracy in Tower Hamlets. And what has happened, even, that is number one. That's number one, the first group who said or claimed at the time that they were opposed to the foisting of the post of elected mayor on the borough of Tower Hamlets. That was 2010. And it seems, going back, that I have been having to raise them awaken them from time to time. Now, that's number one group that oppose the kind of principle of having an elected mayor during the period before the referendum was concluded. And the referendum was concluded on the 6th of May 2010. And it was a referendum that was intentionally lost by the Labour Party. Because in the Labour Party itself, in Tower Hamlets, there were dishonest individuals who pretended to be against the mayor system, but in fact were ambitious individually for themselves to become mayor candidate for in the name of Tower Hamlets Labour Party. And as I said, on the 14th of September 2010, there was a meeting which turned out to be a meeting of celebration for Lutfur Rahman, who had been announced as the Labour Party's candidate for the elected mayor few days earlier. And the fact that I was there was by accident. None of the criminals would want me to be there because I was the one leading the campaign against the mayor system. So the criminals would not want me there. But because they didn't even make it public that they were having a thing there. It was very much a creepy kind of connection that they used, or creepy network of connections, let's say, that they used to hold that celebration at the Truxy, which is in the Limehouse area in Commercial Road. So when I arrived there with a camcorder, I was able to take some pictures, not all of them, but some pictures that showed that almost all the people, except a few, were Bangladeshis, which was outrageously, kind of offensively disrespectful to the community. It should never have been only mainly Bangladeshis. It should have been other people as well from the community, from the Bara, from the electorate. And one of the main reasons why I oppose this elected mayor system is because of this corruption. And the corruption based on the kind of closing of the ranks of these crooks, the network of crooks among the Bangladeshi community. Now that is bad for democracy. That is bad for ethics and accountability, and that is bad in every respect for the due delivery of the services by the local council. Local council, remember, it's supposed to be for everyone. But there is this shameless corruption among the Bangladeshi kind of crooks. Most of the Bangladeshis are not crooks, but these crooks are crooks. These crooks that abuse the Bangladeshi community are the crooks that I'm referring to. So don't confuse the statement I'm making. I'm not denouncing most Bangladeshis who are not crooks, but I'm denouncing the crooks who abuse the Bangladeshi community and are themselves members demographically, biologically of the Bangladeshi community. So we shall come back to that time and again. Now, going back to Nazir Ahmad, can you imagine this criminal actually committed a sexual attack in Rotherham? Now that was decades ago. This criminal buggered a child in Rotherham. Ahmad, 64, was found guilty yesterday, that is Wednesday, of buggery against a boy in Rotherham. And twice he has been found guilty. And twice attempting to rape a girl. Buggery was the legal term for this specific sexual assault at the time of the offense or offenses. Now, this account in The Guardian has also references to what has just happened in New York about the Ghislaine Maxwell trial being declared as not having been properly done because of the stupidity of a juror. Now, this says a previous trial against Nazir Ahmad collapsed last year owing to errors made by the prosecution. And this is a statement by the Crown Prosecution Service person called Ainsley. She considered that disclosure failure should not happen, but said the case showed the challenges faced in dealing with huge amounts of information and proper disclosure to the defense to allow a fair trial. This idiot juror in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial is being heavily condemned today. That is the 6th of January 2022, because of what he has idiotically kind of set off and the claims that he made in his interview statements about his role as a juror that convicted Ghislaine Maxwell has triggered questions seriously advantageous tactically to Ghislaine Maxwell for investigation into whether this particular juror had disclosed before being selected to that particular jury the fact that he himself had been a victim of sexual abuse and violence and whatever. Because if he didn't answer the question, if he didn't tell the kind of procedure people that he was himself a victim of sexual abuse, if he didn't say that, then his statement yesterday that he influenced the other jurors to understand what sexual abuse means, and that helped, according to him, them declare Ghislaine Maxwell guilty. That's a very serious kind of consequence by an idiot. Because if he had declared at the time of this election that he was a victim, then he would have been in the clear. Because either he would not have been selected, or he would have been on the record as having clearly stated that he was a victim himself. Now, when asked yesterday, when he was talking about his experience, whether he declared that he was a victim of sexual assaults, he said, he answered, he went very straight, he went smoothly through all the 50 questions in the questionnaire that was actually necessary to be complied with or completed by every selected jury or every person that was to be on the jury. So this is what this woman from the Crown Prosecution Service is talking about in context, in reference to the trial, a previous trial against Nazir Ahmad collapsing because there was a problem with the disclosure. Okay, having said that, let me kind of fast forward to Ghislaine Maxwell and what we have been saying about the prospect of a new trial producing a different result. It is absolutely impossible that all the evidence that has been known and has been heard and all the information that has been been in the public domain in the last week since Ghislaine Maxwell was declared convicted, it is impossible that anyone who is going to be on the jury is going to not know that. And the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, if there is indeed, and I emphasize this strongly, if there is indeed a new trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, then that new trial would be even tougher for her because of all the information being already known, which was not the case when her last trial took place because most of the information was new to the jurors and new to the court. So let's go back to Nazir Ahmad and his sexual. How is it that three brothers, so-called three Muslim brothers, were committing the same sexual attack against their victims? And this was the criminal disguised as a senior, respectable Muslim leader in the House of Lords, as they say, by the crooks and tar hamlers who brought him to be paraded in the Hanbury Street Brady Center on Saturday, the 6th of February 2010. That shows the political kind of bankruptcy and degeneration of the crooks and tar hamlers. How dared they bring a criminal like Nazir Ahmad? Well, on the 6th of February 2010, Nazir Ahmad was not known as a convicted criminal, sex kind of rapist and other sexual perversion crimes. But there had been allegations against him that I knew about because I always keep in touch, keep aware, keep informed myself, keep myself informed and aware. And even regardless of any such kind of detailed awareness on my part, let's say the first principle about ethnicity being used, like Tony Liar used the ethnicity of Nazir Ahmad to put him in the House of Peers. Any ethnicity that is used by either party or any sponsor, the next numerical one is the Lib Dem party, any ethnicity that is used as a reason for somebody to be put in the House of Peers is corrupt, is criminal. For example, in Tower Hamlers, by that time, by that kind of date, Saturday, the 6th of February 2010, the only member of the House of Peers who was actually connected with the London Borough of Tower Hamlers, Paula Munzila Uddin, had already been under investigation by at least the Times newspaper group about her theft of money from the public, from the House of Peers, on the false criminal ground that her house in Tower Hamlets, which belongs to the Spitalfield Housing Cooperative, now Spitalfield Housing Association, was not her house, that she actually lived in another town somewhere in Kent or in Surrey. And because she claimed that her house, ordinary house, was in another county outside of London, procedurally, she could claim allowances. And every member of the House of Peers who even for an hour turns up at the House of Peers a day can claim hundreds of pounds. And using that method, that she had a house in another county, which was her main house, Pola Monzilauddin stole hundreds of thousands of pounds. So that's a woman that abused the fact that she was of Bangladeshi origin, and she got herself slotted in as a House of Peers member. And once she was there, she set about stealing and thieving. Now, that is one of the reasons. The fact that Paula Monzilauddin was a member of the House of Peers was a very solid ground to oppose another Paula Monzilauddin, the difference being that that would be in the post of the executive mayor in Tower Hamlets. Because no matter who they were, if, and this is the critical point, if anyone got a membership of the House of Peers or a member of the House of Commons, mainly because they were Bangladeshi in Tower Hamlets, then the danger was that this person would be doing no service to the community. And the chances were that they would be discrediting the community. That is why I am not against any individual, whoever they are, kind of becoming a holder of a post. I have no reason to be jealous in the ordinary sense about anybody, because the integrity and the honesty that I have, based on my record of decades, are so unique that nobody, no matter what post they get in, can begin to touch my level of morality and ethics. So I have no reason. I have absolutely no human reason to be jealous of anyone. And I've never been motivated by any jealousy ever. So, when I oppose the elected mayor post, and I call the post a crooked post, I do so on the evidence, not because I am personally in any way interested to get hold of the post. As I say, I have said no to hundreds of offers from various people on the simple principle that I am not going to do anyone any favor by lying for them or lying with them or lying in association with them. And that is entailed in any offer, whether it's a central government offer, it's a regional government offer, and it's an offer from an organization or an individual. So, when Nazir Ahmad was a sexual pervert and his two brothers, they were not behaving as Muslims, they were behaving as devils. And yet the crooks in Tamlers brought Nazir Ahmad forward and put him on the kind of platform at the Brady Center on the 6th of February 2010. So that was bad enough. Very bad indeed. And we didn't know who was inside because we were outside the Brady Center on the 6th of February 2010. And our main principle was to stop this corruption, whoever was promoting this corruption. And at 2 points, 2 things happened while I was with the loud hailer. Galloway effectively took it as a given that I would give him the microphone. I have no idea what he based that expectation on, but he kept asking. Well, I'm not saying requesting because it was such a noisy, tense position. Request would not occur. He was like pleading, desperately pleading. And I said, no. I have been actively campaigning since way before Galloway left his primary school, or whatever, the same age. And Galloway had no idea, still doesn't have any idea how many temptations, political careerist temptations, I have been resisting. For me, resisting those temptations and maintaining my ethical and moral integrity is worth much more than all the posts and positions in political careers that have been available or offered to me. So, Nazir Ahmad was one crook. Keith Sleaze Vaz was another crook. Ken Lying Still Livingston was another crook. Now, I had known Ken Lying Still Livingston since 1977. And I had exposed Keith Sleaze Vaz in that very building, Brady Center, in 1989. Or between 1987 and 1989, when I forced Sleaze Vaz at a public meeting gathering to publicly say sorry to me. That was not long after he became a, quote, elected black section MP. So I have active engagement evidence with these criminals. He apologized because I had said to that gathering that if he didn't apologize, he would not be leaving the gathering in the same shape that he had come in. And the chair of the meeting told him to apologize. And Sleaze Vaz did apologize. First time in his life. So in that very building, Sleaze Vaz had apologized decades earlier. Apologized to me and to the community in the East End of London, because that is whom he insulted. So the crooks that had got him back at the Brady Center on the 6th of February 2010. The crooks had no idea that they were bringing back damaged goods. Goods that had been damaged in the same very building, uniquely in the whole world. There is no record of sleazebaz apologizing to anyone. But the fact that sleazebaz made a remark which warranted my demand that he apologized showed the complete lack of ignorance. Lack of self-respect and lack of knowledge. Sleazebaz, of course, was later, much later, exposed as a user of male prostitutes. Well, he was exposed by the Daily Mirror Group. But the Daily Mirror Group exposed him years after the crooks in Tower Hamlets gave him a venerable status at the Brady Center. Sleazebaz, George Galloway, Ken Livingston, and Nazir Ahmad were brought together there or brought into the meeting by the criminals operating in Tower Hamlets who wanted to seize control of the £1 billion worth of budget of the council. So they could steal money and they could abuse the resources of the council by using the brainwashed Lutfur Rahman. Remember, Lutfur Rahman was called brainwashed by the East London Mosque or brainwashed by the IFE at the East London Mosque. That allegation or assertion was made by Abbas Uddin Elias Halal. Abbas Uddin Elias Halal made a representation. It was a poor representation, but it was a written representation plus to the then National Executive Committee of the Labour Party in weeks before the election that took place in late October 2010 for the post of the elected mayor at the expense of Tower Hamlets. Abbasuddin alias Halal wrote to the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party words to the effect that Lutfur Rahman had been brainwashed by the people operating the East London Mosque or the kind of London Muslim Centre. Whatever form the actual document contained, I have paraphrased it accurately in terms of the fact and the content. So it is something that echoed the main thesis contained in the Dispatches program aired on Channel 4 television on the 1st of March 2010 and fronted by Andrew Gilligan. Now, for some people who don't know about Andrew Gilligan, let's say what his main kind of achievement is. What event made him have a profile as a journalist? It was the sexing up of the Saddam Hussein based allegation by Tony Blair that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. And the actual expertise about the truth or falsehood of Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction was produced by David Kelly. Now, David Kelly was the scientific advisor who was later found dead. Now, it is quite clear that David Kelly was murdered. And the murder of David Kelly followed very soon after Andrew Gilligan published on the BBC radio the claim that the actual dossier, which had been the basis of Congenital Liar waging war against Iraq, the dossier didn't give the evidence that Blair claimed it did, because the scientific advice that David Kelly gave showed that there was no weapons of mass destruction. And David Kelly was murdered as a result. And the identity of the person who gave the advice was not known until Andrew Gilligan broadcast the name of David Kelly. So many people, including Ken Livingstone Livingstone, accuse Andrew Gilligan of being the person who's responsible for the murder of David Kelly. Not that Andrew Gilligan murdered David Kelly, but that Andrew Gilligan exposed David Kelly for agencies to murder David Kelly. Because until Andrew Gilligan identified David Kelly was not known publicly. So the allegation by Ken Livingstone Livingstone and others is that Andrew Gilligan is the one who caused the murder of David Kelly, the scientist. We shall come to that topic later. Now, here is the piece that actually goes back to so there is a woman called Barbara Mills, whose photograph appears on the Guardian on page 23. And the heading to the piece is QC calls for action to tackle race inequality in the legal profession. That's the piece. Now, this piece is bylined by somebody called Harun Siddiq, legal affairs correspondent. Who Harun Siddiq is not clear, but he has been surfacing on the Guardian and very recently has become described as legal affairs correspondent. Now, it is not clear whether this Barbara Mills understands what she is being reported as saying. She is saying that that is African origin and Asian origin people, licensed law traders, should be given status as professional lawyers. But it's not clear that this Harun Siddiq understands any better than any of the other black skinned or black named or Asian named and writers in the Guardian what they are being used to peddle. Because this is a false claim and a false statement. And this is because I'll come to that in a second. Because there is no evidence that this Barbara Mills, who it appears she was called to the bar in 1990 and she was made a QC in 2020, so that's 30 years. And there is no evidence independently accessible in the main kind of domain that she has done anything. This Barbara Mills has done anything to challenge racism. What she's doing in the Guardian piece is that there should be more like her with the hard skin who should be given promotions in the licensed law trading barristers kind of profession, for example. Because she says, according to this Harun Siddiq report, the fact that the race working group even existed and racial inequality was being talked about openly within the profession showed progress since she was first called to the bar in 1990. But the next step required targets, not to be confused with quotas, to pave the way for tangible action, she said. So she is a kind of what she's doing through that piece and in that piece is promoting herself. She's not opposing racism and she's not talking about justice. So the Guardian is wrong. So we're doing this world exclusive diagnosis of the peace treaty. And the Guardian has got a piece that has got two black people. Well, one is of African origin and the other is of Asian origin, the Harun Siddiq. Unless I am very seriously mistaken, and Harun Siddiq appears to be the converted name of somebody of African origin. Because Harun Siddiqi's nomenclature is mainly based on Asian names, not African names. Now, going back to Tony Liar and his kind of knighthood that the Daily Star is treating as a joke. So the Blair Ditch project, which is a kind of take on the Blair Rich project. Soldiers' moms begged the Queen to think again over ex-Prime Minister's honor. 752,000 signed petition following bombshell burned the evidence claims. And that is continuing. There is a piece continuing the piece about Tony Liar, which says in the headline is Blair Gong makes my blood run cold. Parents plead to Queen on U-turn. And the piece on the Blair knighthood is the mothers of 5 children of fallen Afghanistan war heroes have written to the Queen to beg her to strip Tony Liar of his knighthood. And there is an editorial that says Tony Liar's controversial knighthood is certainly opening up old wounds. And they go on. If the outdated honor system must stay, at least give the gongs to those worthy of the title. And I got a shorter piece about Nazir Ahmad. The headline is not factually correct because he is no longer a member of the House of Peer, although they call him the peer. Peer is guilty of sex rap. But then in the copy they say ex-Labour peer Nazir Ahmad has been found guilty of attempting to rape a young girl in the 1970s. A woman told Sheffield Crown Court it happened when he was 16 or 17, but she was much younger. Now, this is like a repeat of what we have read in the Guardian about him, which suggests there is a copy that has been bought from the Press Association news service. It's almost identical, except the length of the piece in the Guardian is much longer. but not all of that length must have been brought from the Press Association. It must have been the Guardian's kind of work as well. But essentially, Nazir Ahmad is being reported today as having been found guilty yesterday, convicted yesterday. Yesterday meaning Wednesday, the 5th of January 2022. There are so many people on this planet who are so heartless about animals. And tigers and bears and other species are insultingly referred to by most people, including most journalists, so called. So the New European, which is supposed to be an anti-Brexit weekly, cover price £3.50 I paid today, is running a piece about Vladimir Putin. There's a piece in this edition by Paul Mason, who is a former BBC political journalist. And the headline to his piece is "Collapse of American Democracy is the Greatest Threat of Our Times." That is true. And Alistair Campbell's diary has got this particular item in it about Johnson. So is talking about Boris Johnson in his diary, this Alistair Campbell, who is described as editor at large of this New European. So this is the bit he wrote about Johnson. Let's read this. The chants about Johnson at a Leeds United game, unprintable even in this paper. At the darts plus banners which have started to appear, draped from motorway bridges calling him a liar, are all signs that the country really is tiring of him. But I wish people that is the one who unveiled a banner on the M25 would stop portraying him as a clown. It is a sign of how unfunny he has become, that two comic geniuses, Billy Connolly and Ricky Gervais, both got serious over the holiday period. Connolly said it was time we stopped listening to silly posh people in general, and Johnson in particular. Gervais asked a brilliant question: when are we going to realize that the words "when to Eton" are not a qualification for anything, let alone running the country? When indeed? Now he has got more than one piece about Ghislaine Maxwell. In fact, he has got 1, 2, 3, 4 about Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, the reason I'm referring to this is that Alistair Campbell was a tabloid journalist at the Daily Mirror before he was recruited by Tony Blair in the 90s, just before the May 1997 election. And Alistair Campbell, not Alistair Darling, I correct myself. This is so he was working for the Daily Mirror. So here is the question for Alistair Campbell. When did he find out enough about Robert Maxwell stealing the pension funds that belong to the employees of the Daily Mirror? When did he find out about that? Because whenever he found out about the fact that Maxwell was robbing the pension fund, he didn't publish anything. He didn't publish that fact, and nor did anybody else. They all waited until after it was confirmed that Robert Maxwell had died before they began to pretend to know for the first time that he had been stealing billions. So there is this diary by Alistair Campbell, which is devoted to Ghislaine Maxwell, really. And it is absolutely dishonest. I'm not going to read Paul Mason for the simple reason that Mason is a very unreliable and corrupt and racist individual. Now this juror who has surfaced as this century's stupidest moron is featuring all over the place, because although he cannot be held responsible for Ghislaine Maxwell's crimes, he is giving her a lot of excuses at a time when she almost ran out of excuses. And there is another piece in the Daily buying Boris Johnson graph supporting Tony Blair's knighthood. And there is a piece from this African woman called Kemi Badenoch. I mean, Kemi Badenoch, if you split the second name, Bad Enoch, it's a Bad Enoch equal to a black-skinned woman being the worst possible proponent of the racist ideology. Think about that. Bad Enoch. Enoch Powell being revived by a black-skinned woman. And so on. And the Telegraph, daily bribing Boris Johnson graph is condemning the Crown Court in Bristol. In the case of the Bristol 4, who toppled the statue of Colston in Bristol. And the financial crisis, the first editorial of the two editorial comments on Thursday, the 6th of January 2022, is headed How to Avert Another US Capitol Siege. And the solicitor's firm named as Mishcon has been fined £232,500 by the Solicitors Regulation Authority. So let's see what the first paragraph says. Mishcon de Rea, the law firm, has been fined £232,500 for a series of money laundering failures, marking its second regulatory penalty in 3 months. Mishcon admitted to a series of breaches, including failing to carry out adequate due diligence in 4 separate matters, misplacing a record of diligence it did carry out, and failing to train a partner in anti-laundering rules. The sanction is the latest against Mishcon, which hopes to list on the London stock market this year. The group was in October forced to pay £25,000 for breaking rules that prevent law firms from being used like banks. The latest penalty is the largest issued by the Solicitors Regulation Authority and covers an extensive list of findings against Mishcon spanning 2015 to 2019, including work involving companies in high-risk jurisdictions. The regulator found that Mishcon did not conduct adequate due diligence when working for two individual clients and connected corporate vehicles between 2015 and 2017, etc., etc. This is Mishcon on page 10 of the Financial Crimes of Thursday, 6th of January 2022. We shall do an overall kind of update on the licensed law trading criminals and crooks. As we say, they are crooks, licensed law trading criminals. Call them barrister, call them solicitors, call them legal executives. And back to South Africa, the land of Desmond Tutu. Now, putting the eulogies in context, eulogies, that is, the praise published for Desmond Tutu. Now, this piece by Joseph Cottrell, there was a racist criminal called Bob Cottrell who was operating on the peripheries of the GLC in the mid-1980s. That criminal has disappeared. Not long after a criminal attack he organized at the Robert Montefiore School premises in the Valence Road in May 1985. More on that in due course. Now here is Zuma. In the heading it says, Zuma presided over rampant corruption, says Graft Inquiry. And this is written by Joseph Cottrell. Cottrell is spelled Cotterell, whereas the racist Robert Cottrell, the Cottrell was spelled Cotterell, I think. And that criminal had also appeared as a so-called contributor in the Times education supplement around the same time. So we shall investigate and update accordingly. Jacob Zuma, the former president of South Africa, presided over a scarcely believable picture of rampant corruption at the country's most critical state companies, according to the first conclusions of a years-long inquiry into graft under his rule. An initial report to President Cyril Ramaphosa on Tuesday called for the prosecution of former senior officials and castigated international enablers of the rot, such as Bain and Company, the global management consultant. It detailed the looting of the national airline, the undermining of the revenue service, and other instances of corruption under Zuma, who left power in 2018. The inquiry, headed by South Africa's Deputy Chief Justice, is reporting back for the first time since it was set up 4 years ago to investigate claims that the Guptas, a business family, and other private interests plundered public resources with Zuma's aid. The influence the Guptas exerted over former President Zuma was considerable. It included in the first of what will be three parts. It concluded in the first of what will be three parts. Zuma was jailed last year for defying a summons from the inquiry, sparking South Africa's worst post-apartheid violence. He is now fighting a return to prison after his early release on medical parole was judged unlawful. Zuma fled the inquiry rather than answer difficult questions on why he kept Dudu Maimi, a close ally, as chair of South African Airways. As she brought, Dudu is a woman, it seems. Okay, she brought the once respected flag carrier into a shambolic state, the report said. He did not want to account to the nation, it added. Ramaphosa on Tuesday welcomed the inquiry's first report as a defining moment for South Africa's battle against corruption. But its content will be highly embarrassing for the governing African National Congress, and is being published as faith is flagging in Ramaphosa's ability to deal with impunity and rot in the state. Also under fire is Bain, which helped Zuma to undermine and weaken the revenue service as part of the capture of the state. Its public contracts in South Africa should be reviewed, the report said. In a question tabled to the House of Lords yesterday, Peter Hain, the Labour peer, called on the UK government to suspend all contracts with Bain in light of the evidence of its unlawful activity in South Africa. Hain, a former anti-apartheid activist, previously led United Kingdom regulators to investigate British banking ties to the Guptas in 2017, at the height of the scandal over their influence in South Africa. Quote, that a multinational company such as Bain would act as a willing and knowing accomplice to corruption by those intent on undermining the South African state and its democracy is outrageous, Hain wrote in a letter yesterday to Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister. The report has recommended that several former officials at South African Airlines, including Maini, should be investigated for possible fraud. It has also called for Tony Gupta, one of the family brothers, to be probed, that is investigated, over alleged bribes in relation to a Gupta-owned newspaper's receipt of state funds. Miani has denied wrongdoing. The Guptas, who left South Africa when Zuma lost power, have always denied wrongdoing. According to the report, when a civil servant resisted the encroachment of the Gupta media empire on the state, President Zuma was prepared to throw his own comrade in the ANC into the street just because he had refused to be party to a corrupt arrangement sought by the Guptas. Bain, which took on a consulting contract at the Revenue Service, met Zuma before they had even been appointed. In reality, there was no need for consultants. The body was instead deliberately captured, the report said. Bain and Company said it was disappointed that the report mischaracterizes its role at the tax body, but that it would continue to cooperate fully with the authorities. While we made mistakes in our work with SARS, we remain confident that we did not in any way willfully or knowingly support state capture at SARS or elsewhere, it said. Now, remember the word capture. That is exactly what Andrew Gilligan, in his 1st of March 2010 dispatches broadcast on Channel 4 in London, had begun the program by referring to a plot, a plan, brazen plan to capture Tower Hamlets Council by the elements that he was reporting in the dispatches program edition called Britain's Islamic Republic. As far as Andrew Gilligan was concerned, the Islamic Republic was at work in the way that it was at the complex jointly housing the East London Mosque and the London Muslim Centre in Whitechapel Road, in Tower Hamlets, in London E1. So the capture of Tower Hamlets Council worth £1 billion budget in 2010 was what the executive mayor plot was about. And as soon as the election of October happened for the post, the executive mayor post, and the capture process began in Tower Hamlets. And they started to abuse Tower Hamlets Council's, quote, powers and resources in the same way that Zuma began the corruption or carried out the corruption. The two-word phrase is rampant corruption in Tower Hamlets Council. So we shall be ending this particular broadcast at this time. And we shall continue all the topics and issues in the following editions, following broadcasts in due course.